Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's partner webinar. We are so delighted to have Steve Johnson, our Enterprise Sales Director for Northern Europe, and Hasina Donji, who does sales acceleration for Europe here today to talk about ICX enablement. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started today. All lines are currently on mute, so if you do have any questions, please send them over through the Q&A window. We will answer all the questions at the end during our Q&A session. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing the recording as well as the slide deck after the event. If you have any trouble with audio, please hang up and call back through your phone. All right, before we get into today's presentation, I would like to share a new engagement program that we are implementing with our partners. So we want to make the time you spend with us on these webinars every week a little more meaningful and engaging. So we decided to make these webinars a little more fun by bringing in incentives and the potential to earn points. We will introduce these incentives in a few different phases. So for today, we will start by giving out attendance prizes. You can receive up to 50 points worth approximately $10 for attending at least 40 minutes of today's webinar. Next week, we will bring in more opportunities to win even more bigger prizes. So here are just a few examples of rewards that you can win. And then collecting your winnings. In order to collect these points, you must be signed up and registered on the Ruckus Partner Portal. And then you can claim these rewards through the Ruckus Incentive Center. So these slides will be shared with you after the webinar, so you can review this in more detail. And if you do have any questions, you can type them in through the Q&A window or send me an email at anna.glumac@comscope.com. All right, now let's get back to today's partner webinar, and I will hand it over to Hasina.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Wherever in the world you're joining us from, I hope you're well and you're safe. We're here today to talk to you about one of our key growth engines on the networking side of the business. We've named this the Ruckus Edge, and what Steve and I are here to deliver to you today is an enablement session to run through on the next slide the main goals of the enablement series. So this fundamentally is a different kind of sales presentation. So what we're not here to do is give you a long read of features and functionalities and details behind the product. What we are here to do today is to give you an end-to-end story. So we're going to look at the opportunity with ICX through the lens of a customer and drawing together our full portfolio. We want to deliver you the framework to enable you to give a superior selling experience to your end customers and teach you how to win that switching sales cycle all the way from the start, from identifying the opportunity all the way through to closing the deal at the end of that sales cycle. I appreciate we have a number of different people on the call, so maybe this language is very familiar to many of you. To some of you, maybe it's not so familiar. So you'll have to forgive us if we're taking it at a pace that's different to what you're used to. So this end-to-end sales process is really our goal here today. And on the next slide, the reasons why this is important for us are really to gain a competitive edge. So by delivering complete solutions to your customers, we're going to talk you through today a value proposition that gives your end customers benefits that no other vendor can deliver. Additionally, this engagement allows you the opportunity to provide insight to your customers. More and more of our customers are seeking advice and best practice and guidance from the partner community and from their vendors. So more and more prospects will be converted using this methodology of providing insight, looking into the future and ensuring they have future-proof solutions ready to meet that up and coming demand. And lastly, we have promotions to help you accelerate those wins and give you some transactional pricing in market to enable you to remain competitive when out in front of your customers. Next slide, please. So let's have a look into the most likely scenario that your customer is encountering. So for whatever reason, a lot of our customers have that great, well-known Ruckus wireless technology. It's, as a brand, that's what we've been famous for in the industry up until now, is that unparalleled superior wireless performance. And many have paired that wireless with another company's switches. However, those challenges that your customers have will align perfectly to our value proposition. When considering an investment into their networking infrastructure, the main challenges that many IT directors are looking to address include things like replacing old equipment, lowering the cost of the network, meeting that upcoming traffic growth that we're due to see with this explosion in devices that will just continue on and on from 2020 and further, and gain further insight and data into that network to allow them to make business critical decisions in terms of where they're focusing their resource and their investment. So the full study of where we collated all these data points is available here. So we have this IHS market study that was carried out across IT directors. And what we're aiming to do by delivering this story is show you how you can help your customers meet those top priorities when it comes to investment in networking. So next slide. So the framework through which we're going to deliver this, as I mentioned, this is a different kind of sales presentation. We're not here to talk through the features and functionality of our ICX switch portfolio. What we are here to do is go through this process exactly through the lens of a customer. So starting all the way at the beginning of the sales cycle with identifying the opportunity, what are those top questions that we need to ask to show that that customer is ready to make that investment? Through to setting the buying criteria, a differentiated step that's really important when it comes to delivering a competitive solution to your customer. Before you deliver the value proposition, handle those objections and close that opportunity and close that prospect. So starting with identifying an opportunity. So here, the customer is probably in this mindset of not knowing, either being unaware there's a problem or perhaps not fully appreciating the impact of the problem. So in that conversation with a customer, right, who's either out of market or right at the beginning of that sales process, what are those key questions that we can ask in a wireless opportunity to discover if that customer is ready to make an investment in their ICX portfolio? And with that, I'll hand over to Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Asina. And I just echo Asina's sentiment that I hope you're all safe and well. So my name is Steve Johnson. I'm the Region Director for Northern Europe for the enterprise business. But prior to that, I have some history. You can see there's a bit of grey in my beard now. I've been around for a little while, and most of that time has been in the Ethernet switch networking marketplace. So I've previously worked for companies like Extreme Networks, some of you may know, also HP, I'm sure many of you you know. And if you are old enough and you have your own few flecks of grey in your beard, you might remember a company called 3Com, which is where I started up a long time ago, which is why I've been asked to take you through this. So what are the kind of questions that we need to be asking to identify the switching opportunity in the first place for the customer during your day-to-day engagement with them? There's probably four. These is certainly not an exhaustive list, but there's probably four things that recur more than any others. And these are kind of the areas that I recommend that you prod if you're not already doing with your customer. So the first is a very typical one, is how old is your Ethernet switching infrastructure. Typically, most organizations look to build in some kind of 5-year, although in some markets it's longer. Education is typically 7 years. Is a bit more common. I was in a school relatively recently. Well, I say that it's just before Christmas, and found an old network that was a 3Com network that was over 13 years old. That I was surprised to find. But most organizations will be looking to refresh about every 5 years, just to keep up with the demands that their communications platforms put on the network itself as well. So it's a great question to ask is kind of how old is your investment? The second, which is very, very common today, and while not everybody is deploying Wi-Fi 6 today, almost every customer I speak to across my entire region is talking about their next investment in Wi-Fi being Wi-Fi 6 and refreshing to Wi-Fi 6. Well, Wi-Fi 6, as I'm sure you know, is the first iteration of Wi-Fi that's going to produce multi-gigabit speeds out of the access point. And if you're producing multi-gigabit speeds out of the access point and your Ethernet port that it's connected to is only 1 gig, then your switching environment becomes your bottleneck to enabling the investment that you've made in Wi-Fi. So everybody that's talking to a customer about a Wi-Fi 6 refresh should also be talking to them and asking questions around what they're planning on doing with their networking infrastructure. Quite a big one that a conversation that I'm having a great deal at the moment is around the amount of OpEx expense that organizations are spending, particularly with, the traditional move, add, change, management of a Wi-Fi and an Ethernet switch network, but also the amount of time that help desks and the IT resources are spending trying to troubleshoot problems and try and fix problems. So identifying whether or not the customer has two different management platforms, one for the Wi-Fi and one for the Ethernet switching, is a great opportunity to start proposing a solution to those challenges. And finally, this is very common again across a lot of customers, is are they looking at deploying a mission critical application, a new application? Often these are communications applications, whether it might be Microsoft and Teams or Skype or any of the WebEx, itself and so on. Are they looking at deploying, and it's particularly pertinent today in the environment that we find ourselves in, where we're all having to use a lot more video communications than we have done previously. Is the organization looking to roll out one of these new applications? And if so, will they need to invest in the networking infrastructure to enable their investment in the application to work effectively? And back to Hasina.
Thanks, Steve. So the next phase in the customer journey is setting this buying criteria. So we've identified with these questions, if your customer's answers yes to any one of those questions, it's likely there's an opportunity for wired in that wireless customer, with that wireless customer. The next phase of the journey is the customer thinking how to address this challenge. Now that they're aware of it, how is he or she going to address this challenge? And this stage of the customer journey is probably something that most of you do intrinsically without consciously realizing, but is a key critical step in terms of getting you on that pathway of having a customer to say yes. So setting the buying criteria is really around preempting the competition by setting a criteria with your customer about the outcomes they want to achieve with their investment. By doing this, it allows you to set up your value proposition when you deliver it to perfectly line up that criteria they've articulated in the stage beforehand, preempt the competition and make your solution the only one, the no-brainer, the obvious one to say yes to. An example of how to do this, Steve is going to take us through with some real-life examples with customers.
Perfect. Thanks, Hasina. So if we can just build this slide, please, would be great. Thank you. So as Hasina said, this is something that you all probably do already, but unconsciously and subconsciously. And there's an opportunity, I think, and it's certainly worked for me and the guys that work for me, to really practice this and train on this and think about it and make it a conscious thing that you do. And really, there's three areas that we would recommend that you lead with this on. And the key to it is to start making statements and start engaging in conversations with your customer that don't necessarily overtly call out CommScope or the Ruckus brand itself. But as Hasina said, kind of take them by the hand and lead them down a path. And at the end of that path is the solution that you're bidding. So around the management platform and the fact that the Smart Zone management platform now manages both the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet switching environments, a question like, or a statement like, I think that having a seamless management layer for both your switching and wireless will address the problems that you have around, the OpEx costs and the challenges that you're facing with the troubleshooting and the moves, adds, and changes activity that you're needing to go through. From a scalability point of view, which again lends itself directly to your bid behind the Ruckus branded CommScope platform, having a scalable modular switching network will address your concern with outlaying too much CapEx up front. And scaling your investment as you grow, kind of invest as you grow in your Ethernet network. And ultimately, the key one is around performance. Having a multi-gigabit switching network will enable your next generation Wi-Fi 6 probably, deployment to actually be unleashed and deliver the relevant performance and services that you hope from it. So a couple of direct examples. One I was directly engaged in, and the other one I'm very aware of. Again, if you could build the slide, please. So the first example I've got was the one that I was directly involved in and managed the team that won this deal. It's a major multinational pharmaceutical company, well over 50,000 employees, 200 sites worldwide, very complex, large enterprise type environment. And they had a specific challenge that they were facing, that their driver for refreshing their network was specifically that they wanted to deploy a new mission critical application. It was a communications platform that was new across the entire organization. You can imagine with an organization of this size and this scale, how important this was to them. So we were able to have some conversations with them off the back of actually challenging them in the first place. They started off by releasing a request for information, which was essentially a bill of materials. You know, we want X number of switches with this many ports of this speed and so on. And they simply asked us, and I think they asked all of our competitors or all of the major enterprise class competitors to do the same thing. Just send back a price on it. So we challenged them on that and said, no, we're not going to do that. We think there's a better way of going about this. And off the back of that, we engaged them in conversation. And during that conversation, we were able to identify what their end goal was. And the end goal was the successful deployment and use of this communications platform. And understanding that end goal, we were able to start asking questions and make statements around how what they were actually looking for is a uniformly managed platform to save on the OPEX and reduce the moves, adds, change and overhead of troubleshooting. And we were able to articulate how our solution best, without naming our solution, how our solution best delivered what they were looking for. One of the absolute keys as well in terms of winning this was our ability to talk to them about the need for greater insight into actually what's happening on the network and what's going on with the network itself, which eventually led us to a sale, one of the largest sales I've done of our network analytics platform, SCI. Next slide, please. So this is a university, so I'm very well aware of this, and I know the guys. I've met them at an event we were holding. This is a university. It's actually outside of my region, this one. Major university in the country that it's in, 15,000 students. And they were already a Ruckus Wi-Fi customer. The pharmaceutical company wasn't. So we won the pharmaceutical company across everything. The university was using Ruckus Wi-Fi, but using a different vendor's switching, one of the leading switch vendors. But they were really struggling with the operating cost that was going into managing this switching network, and seeing how more and more how important the Wi-Fi network was to the service that they were delivering their students, how much the balance of the management that they were putting into it, the management resource they were putting into it, was way too heavily weighted towards the networking infrastructure. So we were able to, obviously we had a good working relationship with them. They were already a customer of ours, but we were already able to start talking about how the statement that we could make to them was around how we would be able to simplify. And what they really needed was a simplification of the management platform itself, enabling them to reduce the resources that were so heavily weighted against the Ethernet switching requirements. And again, this is a story that you start down that path of needing this simplified management across the entire estate. And that path in the end leads to the bid that the partner was putting forward, which was entirely based around a Ruckus branded solution. Okay, that's me, and I'm going to pass you back to Hasina for the next section.
Thanks, Steve. And I think as Steve mentioned there, the first example especially, that whole differentiation of going back and seeking and challenging that customer to understand what are the key problems they're looking to solve, as opposed to just delivering a price or delivering a bill of materials comparable to to the requirements that were set out, is the real differentiator there. That's what's going to lead to that superior sales experience. So back to where we are in terms of this customer cycle. So we've identified the opportunity, we've done our due diligence and set that buying criteria with that customer. We're confident on what key outcomes or key problems he or she's looking to address with this investment. So now the customer's thinking, okay, I know my problem. I understand what I've got to do. I know what sort of metrics and what sort of outcome I'm looking for. Why am I going to buy from you? So here we've got to remember that winning on product differentiation alone is a risky stance to take. So that superior sales experience here, when delivering that value proposition perfectly aligned to that buying criteria, is going to make all the difference. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Steve.
Thanks, Asina. So as you can imagine, our switching value proposition pretty much directly reflects both the industry insight that Hasina presented at the start, as well as the identifying the opportunity questions, as well as the setting the buying criteria statements and conversations that we're able to have. So the flow is very much that we're identifying the opportunity for the customer to lead the customer to the Ruckus platform and the value proposition behind it. Three key areas of the value proposition in terms of headlines. Number one is the converged management, the unique way in which the Smart Zone platform is able to manage very simply both the Wi-Fi, and if any of you are already using Smart Zone just for Wi-Fi, I really urge you to try out managing the Ethernet switching platform as well and see the benefits yourself, to really simplify the management and the overhead, the OpEx overhead, and the resource required to manage both the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet platform. The Ethernet switching portfolio itself is entirely modular, so there are no chassis-based switches in the portfolio, which is not a limitation. We'll come to that a little bit later during the webinar. But what that means is you're able to mix and match the switches that you require to do the different jobs that are required around the network, according to what's needed at any given point in time. So there's very much the ability to spend CapEx or OpEx if you're investing that way as you grow the network. There aren't any significant upfront costs that you won't see a return on until you hit a certain point or until you start deploying certain blades in your chassis. And finally, I firmly believe, as I say, I mentioned just now what my background was and that the organizations I've worked for. I firmly believe that, and I'm most excited about the fact that the Ruckus brand from CommScope is the leading price performance Ethernet switching portfolio in the industry. So we have a full suite right the way from the introductory level switches right the way through to like the 7850 that we launched last year, the big 100 gig switch. And I'm often talking to customers who've seen anything between a 20 and 40% reduction in overall cost after they've invested in the Ruckus technology. So if we can just move on to the next slide very quickly, please. So how to position the converged network management. There's a whole number of things. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but there's a whole number of things that are very commonly re-met during meetings and with customers and the investments that they're making. So the first is, if you haven't seen it, there is a brilliant diagnostics dashboard in Smart Zone, both for wireless but also for the wired platform as well, allowing either help desks or troubleshooting teams or the troubleshooting resource in the IT function to shorten the troubleshooting process literally by hours, in terms of being able to identify at the very early stages exactly what's happening to the packet as it connects to the network. So there's a huge cost saving in terms of the responsiveness as well as the enhanced performance that you get from that as well. The Smart Zone software is everything that you need to manage both the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet switches. You need to buy licenses, of course, for the software, but it's not like you need to have multiple different plugins to enable this. The platform itself, Smart Zone, everything Smart Zone 5.1.1, I think, and beyond, will manage either the Wi-Fi or the Ethernet switches. There are extra features that are available. One that's coming up later this year will be our cloud analytics platform that we launched very recently, which is a fantastic addition and provides you with an extra level of visibility into what's going on the network. But to get up and running and to run a complete network, all you need is the smart zone. One of the things that drew me to Ruckus in the first place and coming to work here was the unique position that Ruckus has had in architecting the smart zone to enable multi-tenancy. So this can be a very high value, either for an end user who's hosting their own version of smart zone and has a multi-site or complex deployment, maybe a university campus or a large healthcare environment, where they might want to segment the different zones because there are actually different functions within the resource. In healthcare, you have the cure part of a hospital, but you also then have a care environment as well. And the demands on the network can be very different in either environment. But it's also a fantastic feature for you as partners where you're looking to deploy as a service type solutions into your customers. So if you're starting up or you have some kind of managed service type environment, it's very, very good. And it always has been from a Wi-Fi point of view. Now, as well as delivering Wi-Fi for a service, including the Ethernet switches, you're able to deliver network as a service, a complete network as a solution. So I guess I'm being moved along in terms of pace. The scalability of the Ethernet platform from Ruckus is phenomenal. And I've already mentioned this modularity of the product. So whether you're using a mix of the switches in the portfolio from the 7150, 7450s maybe as an aggregation layer if that's the way your network is architected, and 76 or 7850s, 40 gig, 100 gig type switches for the core of the network, it's very easy to build that network as you grow and invest in the Ethernet switching platform from Ruckus in the different areas of your network as you want to go through that. A real clever thing that I didn't know until I really got under the skin of the switches is the stacking capabilities and the enormously flexible stacking architecture of the Ruckus switches have. So as I said, I've worked for other network switch manufacturers, and stacking was potentially quite an expensive thing to do. You used to have to buy modules, specific stack modules for each switch. And in some cases, you would then have to buy a proprietary stacking cable to enable that stacking to happen. Well, the Ruckus portfolio uses standard Ethernet ports. So no special modules required, no special cabling required. What that does mean is you can use standard distances for the stacking. So, in theory, stacking distances using fiber technology and SFP plus modules would allow you to stack two switches together that are up to 10 kilometers apart. So again, in campus environments, universities, big colleges, hospitals, and business parks, big single company business parks, it's a fantastic feature, very highly valued by our customers. Next one, please. And the superior performance. So as well as having the multi-gigabit speeds in our portfolio right from the introductory level. So the 7150 is the introductory switch model, and the 7150 already is including 2.5 gig, 5 gig switching speeds right at the edge of the network. So in the most affordable introductory level switch, we're already delivering the multi-gig speeds. But on top of that, Ruckus leads in terms of the PoE capability that we have in our portfolio. And this is becoming more and more important as we see the migration in the building, and particularly the smart building, whatever marketplace it's in, the migration of the smart building to enable a collapse or a coming together of a convergence of the active data network, the passive data network, the cabling itself, but also in some cases the electrical network as both operational technology and information technology. The two worlds start to combine. And what do I mean by this? As well as powering access points or desk phones, Ethernet switches are now powering CCTV cameras, IP CCTV cameras, door management systems, lighting systems, and so on. Next slide, please. So in summary, just to capture that, I've been through quite a few things. If we just, yeah, thank you. I've been through quite a few things there, but in summary, just to capture the high points of that. If your existing Ruckus wireless customer isn't connecting their APs to a Ruckus switch, they are missing out on the ability to enable a reduction in somewhere between, it does vary, but somewhere between 20 and 40% operating costs and CapEx costs. So 20 to 40% lower costs overall. You're reducing their ability to respond even faster as a troubleshooting or a help desk team, enabling both faster satisfied customer, but also as a user of the network, but also enabling higher performance from the network by removing problems in it more quickly. And finally, you know, an inability, they won't have the ability to deliver and power a high performance network supporting the data-rich applications, which include operational technology in smart buildings and smart campus and smart cities these days. So thanks for that. Back to Hasina.
Thanks, Steve. That's a compelling value proposition there. As Steve mentioned, perfectly aligned to that criteria, giving differentiated benefits to your customers, be their drivers around cost, be their drivers around management, you know, speed to market, getting up and running faster or troubleshooting faster, or be it the performance that they need in order to remain competitive and deliver these services and applications to their users. So now in the sales cycle, we are at the point where the customer is going to stress test this theory or this solution that you proposed. So their consideration is, this all sounds great to me. This sounds like a really compelling value proposition and a wonderful solution that matches what I'm looking to do. However, why should I act now? So here your customer is looking for reassurance or for comfort around their choice before they make that decision and before they dive in when it comes to that investment. So we're going to take you through some of the most common objections that we hear from customers at this stage of the buying cycle, and some of those answers and some of those responses that we can give in order to help reassure those customers at this stage. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Hasina. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are specific to Ruckus, and some of the things I'm going to talk about are objections that I've heard no matter which manufacturer I've worked for in my past. So the most common ones, as Hasina said, are listed before you. So, and I'll address each of these over the course of the next few slides. So the first is Ruckus is a Wi-Fi manufacturer, right? You know, they do access points, do really good access points. I get that, but they don't do switches. They've never done switches. I don't quite, you know, see the value in working with a company that has no pedigree and no history behind it. The second one, and this does apply to almost every enterprise class switch manufacturer I've worked for, is the argument: switch is just a switch. You just plug it in, you plug stuff into it, and it just works. So why would I pay the extra money to buy your enterprise class one when I can, you know, go down to my local PC World or whatever your electrical store of choice is and buy one for like half the price? Misconception, but I have heard, is Ruckus. I get that you're building switches for the edge because, you know, you want something to plug your access points into, and, you know, it's a competitive play, but we actually need an end-to-end solution for our Ethernet switching network, and as a result, we really need something for the core of the network, and Ruckus just doesn't have one, right? And the final one, and this is arguably the most common, I guess, is, and it varies depending on which manufacturer is already installed on your customer site, is we already know Cisco, or we already know Aruba, or we already know Juniper, or whatever the incumbent installation is. And it's not necessarily we don't want to retrain our teams on Ruckus, but we perceive there to be a risk in retraining our teams on Ruckus, and the time it's going to take, and the investment that we're going to make or have to make around this, and we just can't go through this. It's easier just to refresh with whatever we bought last time round. We know it might not be the best thing for us, you know, based on what you said, and we agree, but because of this perceived risk, then we think we're going to do that. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So the first one, Ruckus doesn't have a switching pedigree. Well, Ruckus itself has been selling switches under the Ruckus brand for over 2 years, certainly about 2 years now. But the switching platform itself has an unbelievable heritage behind it. So for those of you that don't know, the platform that is currently branded the Ruckus ICX portfolio was previously the Brocade IP switching portfolio. And prior to that, it was grounded and born out of a company called Foundry Networks. So I am going to appeal to those of you that I mentioned earlier that also share a few gray flecks in your beards or in your hair. Those of you that do remember Foundry will have the utmost respect for the technology that Foundry built. So back in the days when I was at 3Com Networks, Foundry was one of our major competitors. Honestly, in the marketplace, they were one of the very few companies that were able to command in the marketplace a higher price than Cisco for an equivalent portfolio. And they were able to do that because of the exceptional quality and the exceptional technology they had built into their switches. So the portfolio that we're talking about today, that's the Ruckus ICX portfolio, is the evolved technology from that original Foundry technology way back then. We've also continued to spend money on it. You know, we haven't just acquired this technology and done nothing with it. We've had 2 major product launches in the last 12 months, the 7650 and the award-winning 7850, CRN's product of the year, I think, last year. Somebody might need to fact check that, but it certainly won a major CRN award, networking product of the year, I think. As well as some major software updates, including, of course, the ability to now manage that infrastructure from the Smart Zone management platform. So on to the next one, please, and we'll just have a visual depiction of what I've been talking about. You know, in the same way that Ruckus has always been at the forefront of Wi-Fi technology innovation, you can see from this display here that the Ethernet switching platform that's currently the Ruckus one has always been at the forefront of the Ethernet switching innovation as well. So first 10 gig switch, first switch in the marketplace, commercially available with 90 watt PoE, the campus network fabrics that was the innovation around the stacking technology, a big innovation around stacking technology. And last year launching the 7850, the ICX 7850, which was the first stackable 100 gig wiring closet switch in the marketplace as well. Thanks. And the next one that we wanted to talk about, if we can move this slide on, please, was a switch is just a switch argument. So I've got a brilliant story on this, but that's a true story as well. I was working with a college, well, my team and I was engaged, but actually my team were doing the major engagement on a college in the south of England, where I am based now. And the college, we went through the sales cycle, and we thought we'd got quite a long way. And we actually thought that the college were very much buying into the value proposition that we'd given them around our unique value. And somebody else joined the evaluation team, somebody that we hadn't been speaking to and didn't know at all. They were from the finance side of things, the procurement side of things. And they very much threw this argument at us. Why would we buy your switch when we can buy this other one? I nearly named the other brand then, and I mustn't do that because that would be inappropriate. But it was generally perceived to be closer to a consumer brand or a small office brand, let's say, than an enterprise grade switch. So it's not one of our major competitors. And they literally, and the price difference was huge. It was about half, they were about half the price that we were. And we took them through all of the reasons why they needed to invest, not in a switching platform that was okay for today, but they needed to be thinking ahead. They need to be looking at the next 5 years, the next 7 years, thinking about what new applications, what new demands there would be on the network, what technology they had to have in their network infrastructure to enable them to cope with all of the demands of the future. And actually, I have to admit that we failed because they did go ahead. The decision-making was dominated by this chap from procurement, and they did go ahead with the lower price alternative, the sort of smaller office alternative, which anybody with any sense would have told them was a mistake, and we certainly did, although we were biased in terms of that we were competing with this. But it's a big deployment, a big site. 2 years later, or just under 2 years later, they came back to us and said, really sorry, cap in hand, you were absolutely right. We need to refresh again. And by the way, we've already kind of selected the ICX portfolio, the Ruckus portfolio, because of everything that we've worked on, and we've kept an eye on it. But the network that we bought 2 years ago for half the price just isn't doing the job today that it was expected to do, and it's starting to fail under the weight of demand that we have today. So real world example, and I'm sure all of you, if you run through your customer list, can find somebody that's had a similar experience. Next slide, please. So Ruckus doesn't have a solution for the core. Well, we've already spoken, or I've already spoken about this. We've got the 7650, which is 10 gig, 40 gig, multiple ports across it. We've got the 7850, which is the 40 gig, 100 gig switch. But what I haven't mentioned is that in all of those, that switching portfolio, pretty much from the 7400 up portfolio, we've also got very sophisticated layer 3 routing functionality as well. Everything that most organizations would need in the core of their network to enable Ruckus to run the core of the network. And we've got many, many examples of customers that have done exactly that. You speak to your local sales representative, I'm sure he'll be able to make introductions for you into a customer that's already done it and is very delighted with the investment that they made as well. And the next one, please, Hasina. Very common. So this perceived risk, and part of it's about a fraud. Part of it is about taking the time away from doing their day job to get people to do this. And part of it is just a perception of change. I might not like exactly what I've got, or it might be costing me too much money, but at least that I know where I stand with it, and I can have a level of faith that we will have a process that we'll be able to follow if something does go wrong. And there are people around me that kind of know what they're doing and are able to talk around this. Well, that's true of any move. If that's the attitude of the customer, then they're never going to change the manufacturer that put the switches in the first place. And essentially, they are locking themselves into a single solution, which ultimately is likely to cost them dearly in the long run. With ICX specifically, it's actually very straightforward. So the basic command, the configuration command language, if you're using the OS, is very similar to a Cisco or an HP. They don't vary tremendously wildly. It is different, of course, and is based on Ruckus technology and the Ruckus architecture, but it's very similar. I can tell you a true story of a Cisco engineer that reported back after we'd lent him one of our switches and said, what do you think about this? He said after about an hour, he was up and running with it. He kind of had all of the key commands. He'd sussed it. He'd worked it out intuitively without following any training course or anything like that. So it's not that big a leap. And the other thing to remember is all of Ruckus's training, whether it's sales training, pre-sales training, or post-sales troubleshooting or deployment technology training, it's all available free of charge, and it's all available from our website in online self-paced courses. Of course, we do run classroom courses as well, if that's your preferred way of learning, but that is chargeable. So a classroom environment would be a chargeable solution. The next one, please, Hasina. Oh, I've done, actually. I'm back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. So we've gone through that whole arc through that customer journey. We've started by identifying the opportunity through the lens of the customer. What are the problems that they're encountering? What are the challenges they're having? And what are some of their goals that they're looking to address before we even get started? We've set the buying criteria of the customer. We've identified what are those key drivers behind that investment, be it cost, be it simplicity, be it the speed of getting to market, be it performance to allow them to deliver applications and services to make them differentiated and keep those business critical services running. We've delivered a value proposition that is differentiated in market, that allows us to give our customers a solution that no other competitor can deliver, be that around converged management, bringing together the two systems, giving customers greater visibility, be that around the price and performance, or be that around the cost driver with scalable, upgradable switching. We've handled those objections, so we've addressed those common myths that are common myths when it comes to making that investment, or the perception of switches, or even the Ruckus ICX line, and reassured that customer before we've gotten to the final stage of the customer journey. So right here, the customer's thinking about what happens if I say yes. I don't know Ruckus as a brand. Am I going to get fired? Am I going to get burned from this experience? Is this Ruckus kit actually going to work? So here we need to create that sense of urgency with a clear call to action and assure the customer of any of those remaining concerns. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Asina. So this is pretty straightforward for me, and this is something certainly that we all do all of the time, but just to highlight some of the things that appear to give us a higher return rate in terms of success. So customers, of course, don't just buy technology, they're also buying into you or your salespeople, and they're also buying into the company and the history of the company, the vision of the company, and the ethical position of the company. So this is the last part of the sales cycle where we just want to give the customer assurance that they're doing the right thing, that we are a great company to work with, that our salespeople are trustworthy, and obviously that your company is a great company to work with as well. And the way we do that very commonly is use references and case studies. A couple of the deals that I spoke about earlier during the setting the buying criteria, we use references extensively. They were very interested in talking to other customers that we had a good experience. And very often that's the one thing that will seal the close for us, is just having that independent conversation with somebody who's agreeable to saying, letting them know what their experiences were. And actually they do hear, it was tough, we had this problem, but the guys from the partner or the guys from Ruckus, they jumped on it really quickly. And believe it or not, these are really positive upfront endorsements of us as a company that our customers love to hear, or prospects love to hear. Do use your local sales representative as well. We're all really keen. I was about to say we're all really keen to get out and on the road now more than ever right now. But we're certainly always the most fun part of my job, and the part that disappointingly I probably have least time to do these days, or less time than I used to. The most fun part of my job is engaging with customers and engaging with partners and helping solve problems and meet challenges. So please don't hesitate to get us involved. And the final thing is a proof of concept. Now, we can't support you with a proof of concept in every deal. That wouldn't scale at all. But in the bigger deals or the more significant and strategic deals, you should definitely look for our support, or ideally you'd be able to do this yourself. Challenge your competitors. So, be bold and be confident, and take the proposition to the customer and say, why don't we have a proof of concept? Why don't we test our product so that we can prove to you, you can actually experience that the things we're saying are reality and are true. We very, very often win in a proof of concept that's us against any of our direct competitors. So really, really happy to enter any of that where it's sensible for us to do that. So strategic or large opportunities. And that's me done. Thanks for your attention. I'm going to finish off now, and Hasina's going to take you through to close.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. So as we set out at the beginning of this session, our goal was really to deliver you a sales framework of how to identify and successfully complete a switching opportunity from start to finish through the lens of that customer, and deliver the insight necessary to be competitive to your prospects and convert more of those prospects into opportunities. So here at the end, now that we've run through this sales framework, I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of the assets that are available for you. So where we're in a position where we're not able to, some of us aren't able to go out and visit customers, here is the opportunity now to have a discussion with our existing install base of those wireless customers to see if there's any opportunity to invest or review their switching infrastructure. So set up these campaigns at the moment in order to build up that funnel and that pipeline and create those opportunities. In order to help you with that, please leverage the marketing campaign. There is a Ruckus Edge campaign either due to launch shortly or live right now on the partner portal, where you can use those MPF dollars to generate leads and pipeline. And there's some great assets in there. There's case studies, there are videos, there are call scripts, there's a whole bundle of assets available for you to leverage and embed into these campaigns to build up those opportunities. And then the last piece is use the velocity promotion that was launched back in FY19 and continues on in 2020 to drive that easy, reliable transactional business. We've purposefully reviewed the ICX discounting landscape and brought a transactional price to market. That means you don't have to go through the lengthy DDO process and you're able to get a price that's right for your customer the first time. And with that, I will thank everyone for their time. Thank you so much for listening to us. And let's drop into the chat window and see if there's any questions that we can address.
So I think Fred has been doing a great job of answering the questions in the Q&A as we've gone through it. There were a couple of others that came through. So one of the questions that was sent privately was, does 10K stacking, 10 kilometer stacking distance mean that we shouldn't go over that distance? I think that's a law of physics. I think that's a physics thing. The signal won't be able to reach beyond the 10 kilometer maximum. Fred, am I right with that?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So yeah, it is a limit of the 10 gigabit LR optics. So, and we haven't tested further because there were no requirement or no request from customer to go further than 10 kilometers.
Yeah. Thanks, Fred.
It's not to go 10 kilometers, it's to go above the 10 or 12 meters that competitor cannot go above.
Perfect. Thanks, Fred. I think we had the troubleshooting question already and some compliments as well. Thank you very much for that. I guess, are we able to take verbal questions, Anna, or are we done?
Yeah, people can raise their hand under the participation, and then I can unmute them.
So would anybody like to do that, please?
Yeah, let me see. Scroll through. All right. Does not look like anyone has questions yet.
Good. Okay, then I'll take the opportunity to thank everybody for their time. Anna, if I can close the call.
Absolutely.
Thanks again for your attention and good luck selling the Ruckus switches in the future. And please remember to stay well. Thank you.